The standoff at the palace gates stretched on for what felt like hours. Liam stood at attention, his grip tightening on his weapon as he kept his eyes on the strangers who had come to threaten the royal family. Every muscle in his body was tensed, waiting for the signal from Captain Holden or the royal family to take action. The air was thick with uncertainty. For the first time since he had joined the Royal Guard, Liam felt a real sense of fear. This wasn't just a drill or a routine ceremonial duty. This was real. But as the moments ticked by, something unexpected happened. The lead figure, the one who had been making the demands, suddenly lowered his hand and stepped back. His expression shifted, no longer as threatening but still hard and calculating. For a brief second, there was a pause, a moment of silence. Then, without warning, the figure spoke again. "You may have won this round, but we will be back," he said, his voice still cold, though now tinged with something else. Defeat, perhaps. "The royal family's time is coming to an end. Prepare yourselves." With that, the group turned and began to walk away, retreating into the shadows. They didn't seem to be in any particular rush, almost as if they were confident in the knowledge that they would return another day. Liam watched them disappear into the distance, his mind racing. What did that mean? Who were these people, and why did they want to harm the royal family? His heart was still pounding from the adrenaline. But the immediate threat had passed. Captain Holden, who had been standing calmly at the back of the group of guards, finally gave a signal, and the tension in the courtyard seemed to release. The other guards began to lower their weapons, but the sense of unease lingered in the air. "We'll need to stay on high alert," Captain Holden said, his voice stern. "This isn't over, but for now, we go back to our posts. Don't let your guard down. Stay vigilant." Liam nodded, feeling the weight of the captain's words. They had won this round, but the danger wasn't over. The group that had threatened them was still out there, and Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they would return soon on this time. They wouldn't back down so easily. As the guards resumed their positions, Liam's thoughts began to swirl. He had been trained for this. His whole life had led to this moment, the chance to protect the royal family and defend the kingdom from those who would seek to destroy it. But this attack, this threat, was different. It wasn't just some random enemy or foreign invader. The group that had come to the gates seemed to know something, to have a purpose that was more than just an attack for power or money. It was personal. Liam's heart still raced, but a new feeling began to grow in his chest. It wasn't fear this time, but a deep, unshakable determination. He had joined the Royal Guard to protect the royal family, to protect the monarchy, and to serve his country. But now he realized that his duty went beyond just standing at attention or marching in formation. His duty was to protect the kingdom from whatever threat came their way, no matter how dangerous or unknown. And he would do whatever it took to stop them in the days that followed. Life in the palace returned to a strange sense of normalcy, though the guards remained on high alert. The royal family continued with their duties, but every action seemed to be watched more closely now. The threat loomed over them. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the unknown group returned. Liam spent his days patrolling the palace, keeping his eyes peeled for any signs of movement or unusual activity. He no longer saw the royal palace as just a place of ceremony and tradition. It was a fortress under constant siege, and every corner held the potential for danger. He knew that the stakes were higher than ever, and the life of the royal family and the future of the kingdom depended on their ability to stay one step ahead of those who wished to harm them. Then, one evening, as the sun was setting and the shadows of the palace walls grew long, Liam received an unexpected order. Captain Holden had requested to see him privately. Liam's heart skipped a beat. The captain had been acting strangely ever since the incident at the gates. His calm demeanor, which had always been a steadying force, seemed to have changed. There was something different about him now, something that made Liam uneasy. When Liam entered Captain Holden's office, he was surprised to find the captain seated behind his desk, his hands clasped in front of him. Looking more serious than ever, "Liam," Captain Holden began, his voice low, "I've been given new orders. We've received intelligence about a possible attack, and we need to act quickly." Liam's pulse quickened. "What do we need to do, sir?" "We need to get to the palace vaults. Immediately, Captain Holden replied, "There's something hidden there, something that must not fall into the wrong hands. We need to secure it before it's too late." Liam felt a chill run down his spine. The vaults. He had been there before during the secret ceremony, but now it was different. Now, the vaults were a target. Whatever lay inside was more important than anything he had imagined. Without wasting any time, the captain gave the order to assemble a team of trusted guards. Including Liam, they would move quickly without drawing attention. The stakes were too high. If the enemy knew what was in the vaults, they would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. The team moved swiftly through the darkened corridors of the palace, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The palace was quiet at night, with most of the servants and staff already retired for the evening. Liam could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just another routine mission. This was the moment that could change everything. As they reached the vaults, Captain Holden led the way, his movements precise and deliberate. He knew the palace like the back of his hand, and his confidence gave Liam a sense of reassurance. Though the nervous energy was still there, they entered the vaults. And once again, Liam was struck by the vastness of the space. The old stone walls, the long rows of shelves filled with ancient documents and treasures, this place held the kingdom's greatest secrets. And now it was up to them to protect it. In the center of the vault, beneath a heavy stone slab, was the chest that had been sealed away for centuries. It was said to contain something that had the power to shape the future of the royal family. The key to the kingdom's survival or its destruction. As Captain Holden began to unlock the chest, Liam couldn't help but wonder, what was so important inside? Why had it been hidden for so long? And why did those who sought to harm the royal family want it so badly? The chest creaked open, revealing the object within. It was an ancient scroll, its parchment yellowed with age, sealed with the royal insignia. The scroll held the key to the monarchy's bloodline, the foundation of the kingdom itself. Captain Holden looked at Liam, his expression grim. This must be protected at all costs. We can't let anyone else get their hands on it. Liam nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The future of the kingdom rested in their hands. As he stood guard beside Captain Holden, the weight of their responsibility never felt more real. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Royal Guard had always been a symbol of strength and protection, but now, more than ever, they were the last line of defense. The days that followed the secret ceremony were filled with tension. Liam had been part of something extraordinary, a moment that few people would ever experience. The weight of what had happened in the royal vaults hung over him like a secret. But despite the awe of the ceremony, Liam had no time to dwell on it. Life in the Royal Guard had a way of moving quickly, and every day brought new challenges and responsibilities. One morning, Liam and the other guards were summoned to the palace courtyard for an urgent briefing. The sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestones as the recruits lined up in neat rows. The atmosphere was different, dense and serious. The usual chatter among the guards was absent, replaced by hushed murmurs. Liam could feel the unease in the air. Captain Holden, who had become a trusted leader in Liam's eyes, stepped forward. His face was as stoic as always, but there was an undeniable urgency in his voice as he spoke. "There has been a credible threat to the royal family," Captain Holden announced, his eyes scanning the gathered guards. "We don't know all the details yet, but we need to be on high alert. Every single one of you will be involved in securing the palace and surrounding areas. No one is to leave their posts, and no one is to speak about this to anyone outside of the guard. Understood?" The words hit Liam hard. A threat. The Royal Guard had always been on standby for potential risks, but this felt different. There was a deep sense of fear that crept into his chest. He had always thought of the palace as a safe place, a fortress protected by the strength and discipline of the guard. But now, even that seemed vulnerable. Liam's mind raced with questions. Who would threaten the royal family? Was this just a precaution, or was the danger real? But there was no time for these questions now. Captain Holden's voice cut through his thoughts, commanding everyone's attention. "Get ready. We leave in 10 minutes. Gather your weapons, Make sure your armor is in place, and report to your assigned posts. I'll give further instructions once we know more. Out. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he moved quickly to the armory to prepare. The usually peaceful morning had turned into something darker, and the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. As Liam donned his armor, couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. There had been whispers about growing unrest in the kingdom, but he hadn't paid much attention. He had been focused on his training, on his duty to protect the royal family. But now, as he adjusted the straps on his chest plate and took a deep breath, the reality of what was happening set in. The peaceful life he had known was about to be shattered, and he might have to face something he wasn't fully prepared for. The palace grounds were bustling with activity. When Liam arrived at his assigned post, guards moved in every direction, their faces set in grim determination. The usually calm courtyard was filled with hurried footsteps and urgent whispers. Liam tried to stay focused, reminding himself that this was his job. His duty was clear. He had to protect the royal family no matter the cost, as he stood watch. Liam couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The threat was still vague. Was it a group of rebels? A foreign invader? Or something even more dangerous? The unknown was what made it so terrifying. Liam had been trained to handle threats, but nothing in his training had prepared him for something like this. An unknown danger lurking at the heart of the palace. Hours passed, and the tension in the air only seemed to grow. Guards were constantly moving, checking their posts, making sure everything was secure. Liam kept his eyes peeled, scanning the courtyard and the surrounding streets for any signs of trouble. But everything seemed normal to normal. That was the problem. The calmness of the day only heightened the sense of dread. It wasn't until the early afternoon that the first signs of danger became clear. Liam was stationed near one of the main entrances to the palace when he saw a group of strangers approaching. They didn't look like ordinary visitors. Their clothing was plain, but there was something about the way they moved that made Liam uneasy. They were walking with purpose, their eyes darting around, as if looking for something or someone. Liam's instincts kicked in. He didn't know who they were, but they didn't belong here. He quickly signaled to the other guards, who immediately sprang into action. The strangers were now within sight of the palace gates, and Liam's heart raced. He could feel the tension building. This was it. The moment they had all been waiting for, the strangers stopped just short of the gates, as if they had been expecting something. Liam's mind raced. What did they want? Why had they come here? He wasn't sure. But he knew one thing for certain. They weren't here by accident. The lead figure in the group stepped forward, and Liam could see that this was no ordinary visitor. The man's eyes were cold, calculating, and there was an air of danger surrounding him. He held something in his hand, an object that Liam couldn't quite make out from his position. The man raised his hand, signaling to the guards to step back. His voice rang out, loud and clear. "We are here for the royal family," he said, his tone cold and menacing. "Step aside, or we will be forced to take action." Liam's blood ran cold. These people weren't here to make demands. They were here to threaten the royal family, and they were prepared to use force. He knew immediately that this was the danger the captain had been warning about. The palace was under attack, and it was up to the royal guard to stop it. The lead guard near the gate signaled for reinforcements. The palace security immediately sprang into action. Liam's heart raced as he took his position, ready to defend the palace at all costs. He could see other guards moving to block the entrance, forming a protective line around the royal family and the palace grounds. The standoff continued for what felt like an eternity. The strangers didn't move, and the guards didn't budge. It was a tense stalemate, with neither side willing to back down. Liam's mind raced as he scanned the situation. What were the strangers after? Why had they come to the palace? And most importantly, what would happen next? Just as it seemed like things were about to escalate, Captain Holden appeared, his voice cutting through the tension. "Do not engage," he commanded, his tone sharp and clear. "We need to keep our cool. We will not be rushed into action." Liam's breath caught in his throat. The captain was right. They needed to keep their heads, stay calm, and think clearly. He couldn't let the fear of the unknown cloud his judgment. The royal guard was trained for moments like this, prepared to protect the royal family and their kingdom from any threat, no matter how daunting. And so they stood there, waiting. The minutes felt like hours, but Liam stayed focused. He wasn't going to let fear control him. He was a royal guard, and his duty was to protect those inside the palace walls. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. The days after the chaotic ceremony were a blur for Liam. The unexpected events of the crowd turning aggressive, the lost child, and the threat against the dignitary had all left their mark on him. Despite everything going wrong, Liam had felt a sense of accomplishment. He had acted quickly and kept his focus, doing what was needed when others may have hesitated. But as with everything in the Royal Guard, there was no time for complacency. The next challenge was already waiting. One morning, Liam was called into a private meeting with Captain Holden, the senior officer in charge of the Royal Guard. This was unusual. Normally, the recruits would spend their days in training, learning drills or maintaining their weapons, but this was different. The captain was a respected figure known for his no-nonsense attitude and sharp leadership skills. When he asked Liam to step into his office, it felt as though something important was about to happen. "Captain?" Holden greeted Liam with a quick nod and motioned for him to sit down. The room was dimly lit, with heavy wooden furniture and walls lined with old royal portraits. The atmosphere was serious, unlike the bright, busy training grounds that Liam had become used to. The air seemed thick with unspoken words. "Liam," Captain Holden began, his voice low but firm, "I've been watching your progress, and I think you're ready for something more." Liam was taken aback. He hadn't expected to be singled out for anything special. He was just one of the recruits doing what was asked of him, trying to keep up with the others. "Ready for something more?" Liam asked, unsure of what the captain meant. Captain Holden's sharp eyes met Liam's. "There's a ceremony coming up, something very rare. Only a few of the Royal Guard are chosen to participate, and I've selected you." He paused for a moment, letting the words settle. "It's a secretive event, Liam. It's not something the public will ever see. But it's one of the most important traditions of the royal family." Liam felt a rush of excitement and fear all at once. What could be so secretive? He had heard whispers in the training camp about the royal family's private ceremonies, but no one had ever spoken about them in detail. These were events only the most trusted members of the Royal Guard were ever involved in. Tomorrow morning, you and a few others will be chosen to accompany the royal family to the old vaults beneath the palace. It's a sacred ceremony where the royal bloodline is honored, and certain objects are passed down to ensure the continuity of the monarchy. Captain Holden continued, his tone serious. "The ceremony requires total discretion. No one outside of the royal family and the Royal Guard is to know about it. Understood?" Liam nodded, his mind racing. He had heard stories about the vaults beneath the palace, legendary treasures and ancient artifacts that were said to be kept there. These were things that had been passed down through the royal family for centuries. The idea that he would be involved in such an event was overwhelming. Captain Holden stood and motioned to the door. "Get some rest tonight. You'll need to be at your best tomorrow. This is a high honor, but it's also a test. A test of your loyalty, discipline, and ability to handle the responsibility that comes with serving the royal family." Liam left the captain's office, his mind spinning. The idea of the ceremony was both thrilling and terrifying. He had no idea what to expect, but the opportunity to witness such a significant moment in the royal family's history felt like a privilege. Still, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. This ceremony was more than just a tradition, it was something deeply important, something that held the key to the monarchy's future. The next morning, Liam and a handful of other guards were chosen to join the royal family for the ceremony. They were led down into the hidden sections of the palace, beneath the grand halls and royal chambers that most people never saw. The corridors were dimly lit, with ancient stone walls that seemed to hum with history. The air smelled musty, and there was a sense of mystery hanging in the silence. As they walked deeper into the palace's underground chambers, Liam couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The vaults were far older than he had imagined, with huge iron-bound doors that seemed to guard secrets from centuries past. The walls were lined with shelves of books, scrolls, and strange artifacts that no one in the outside world knew about. It was clear that these vaults were not just storage rooms, they were a part of the royal family's legacy. When they reached the heart of the vaults, Liam's breath caught in his throat. There, before him, was a stone pedestal with a large ornate chest resting upon it. The chest was unlike anything he had ever seen, carved with intricate patterns and adorned with jewels that shimmered in the dim light. The royal family stood in a circle around the chest, their faces solemn. The queen, as regal as ever, stood at the center, her expression serious as she prepared for the ceremony. Liam, along with the other guards, stood at attention, watching in silence. He had always known the royal family was important, but now seeing them in this sacred setting, he realized just how much weight their actions carried. This wasn't just a ceremonial act, it was a reaffirmation of their power, their connection to the past, and their responsibility to the future of the kingdom. The queen's voice echoed softly through the chamber as she began speaking in a language Liam didn't understand. It wasn't anything he had been taught during his training, and he couldn't help but feel out of place. Still, he remained focused, standing perfectly still as the ceremony continued. At one point, the queen motioned for the chest to be opened. Inside, there were documents, ancient records that traced the royal bloodline back through the generations. There were also rare jewels and artifacts, symbols of the royal family's power and influence. Liam could see the importance of these items, not just as objects but as representations of the monarchy's history. The ceremony continued for what felt like hours, but Liam's attention never wavered. Despite the heavy atmosphere and the weight of the tradition surrounding him, he could sense that something deeper was happening. As the ceremony concluded and the queen stood, the room was filled with a sense of finality. The items in the chest were carefully sealed away once again, hidden from the world, as they had been for generations. Just as the royal family began to leave the chamber, something unexpected happened. The door to the vault suddenly slammed shut behind them, trapping everyone inside. The guards rushed to try to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in for a brief moment, but then in the midst of the chaos, Captain Holden appeared. He quickly took control of the situation, ordering the guards to stand down and to remain calm. Liam could feel his heart racing. This wasn't part of the plan. For a moment, it seemed like something had gone horribly wrong. But then Captain Holden motioned for the guards to step aside. With his usual calm demeanor, he pressed a hidden button on the wall, revealing a secret exit that no one had known about, as they emerged into the daylight once more. Liam couldn't help but feel shaken by what had just occurred. The ceremony had been something he would never forget. But more than that, it had shown him just how much was at stake in serving as a royal guard. There were secrets buried deep within the royal family, and Liam was now a part of them. What lay ahead would be even more challenging, but he was ready. The day had started like any other. Liam, now more accustomed to his life as a royal guard, stood at attention alongside his fellow recruits, perfectly still and dressed in their red uniforms. It was early morning, and the first rays of the sun had begun to light up the palace grounds. The air was crisp, and the usual calm of the royal courtyard was in place. The sound of horses' hooves and distant chatter from servants preparing for the day filled the air, but for the guards, it was business as usual, silent, disciplined, and precise. Liam's task was simple that day. He would be part of the group that would stand guard outside the royal palace for the ceremonial arrival of a foreign dignitary. This event was not unusual. Royal visitors from other countries were a regular occurrence, but today, there was a slight change in the atmosphere. The palace was buzzing with excitement as the day approached, and even the guards could feel it. They had been briefed on the importance of the event, and their training had prepared them for everything except for the unexpected. The dignitary was expected to arrive with a large entourage, and the streets surrounding the palace would be crowded with spectators, eager to catch a glimpse of the royal visitors. Liam and the other guards had been told to prepare for a long day of standing in the hot sun, maintaining their usual stoic expressions and keeping their attention sharp. There would be no room for mistakes. This was the kind of duty that required absolute focus, and every guard knew that their performance was closely watched by both the public and their superiors. As the morning passed, Liam stood with his fellow guards watching the crowds gather. The city streets were filled with families, tourists, and royal supporters, eagerly waiting for the dignitary's arrival. The atmosphere was festive, with flags waving and people chatting excitedly about the event. Despite the joyful energy surrounding him, Liam remained focused, his gaze fixed straight ahead. His body stiff from the long hours of standing at attention. But as the clock ticked closer to the arrival time, something unusual happened. A loud noise suddenly erupted from the crowd, and Liam's sharp eyes quickly scanned the scene. People were pushing and shoving, and a sense of unease began to spread. Liam wasn't sure what was happening at first. Perhaps it was just a small misunderstanding, something minor that would pass quickly. But as the noise grew louder, he could see that something wasn't right. The crowd was becoming more agitated, and a few individuals were shouting, waving their fists in the air. Liam's heart began to race. He knew that crowd control was part of the Royal Guard's responsibilities, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this kind of situation. The peaceful, well-mannered crowds that they had been used to were suddenly replaced by angry voices and unruly behavior. The dignitary's arrival was in danger of being overshadowed by the chaos that was brewing in front of the palace gates. Without thinking twice, Liam's instincts kicked in. His training took over, and he immediately sprang into action. He knew that as a guard, it was his responsibility not only to protect the royal family but also to ensure the safety of the visitors and the people who had come to see the event. He signaled to the other guards, his hand quickly moving through the air in the practiced, precise gestures they had learned in their drills. The other guards responded instantly, adjusting their formations and preparing for what was to come, despite their calm demeanor. The Royal Guard was always ready for a situation like this. They had been trained to deal with protests, crowd disturbances, and threats to the royal family. But in all his time as a recruit, Liam had never seen anything like this. The situation was quickly escalating. People were no longer just shouting. Some were now pushing against the barricades, and a few even tried to climb over them. It was clear that this was no longer just a minor disruption, it was turning into a serious threat. Liam and the other guards took their positions, forming a line to block the path of anyone trying to get too close to the gates. The crowd was becoming more volatile, and the noise was deafening. At that moment, Liam caught sight of a young girl who had somehow been separated from her parents. She was standing alone near the edge of the crowd, crying, her tiny hands gripping the metal barrier in fear. Liam's heart skipped a beat. The chaos around him seemed to fade away for a moment as his eyes locked onto the girl. He had been trained to focus on his duties, to ignore distractions, and stay alert at all times. But in that moment, he couldn't ignore her. She was just a child, lost in a sea of angry faces and confusion. Without hesitation, Liam broke formation. His training had taught him never to leave his post unless absolutely necessary, but in that moment, he made a choice. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. He moved through the crowd quickly but carefully, his uniform and armor making him stand out in the chaos. His presence seemed to calm the crowd for a brief moment, as people noticed him moving toward the little girl. He reached her just as she started to cry louder, calling out for her parents. Liam knelt down in front of her, his voice soft but firm. "It's okay," he said, trying to reassure her. "We'll find your family. You're safe now." The girl looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes, but something about his calm demeanor seemed to comfort her. He gently took her hand and started moving back toward the barricades. Keeping an eye out for any further trouble, the situation around them remained tense. But Liam managed to safely guide the girl to one of the nearby palace staff members, who immediately took her to a designated area to reunite her with her family. As he watched the girl disappear into the crowd, a sense of relief washed over him. He had done something important, something meaningful. But as Liam returned to his post, he realized that the situation was far from over. The noise and tension in the crowd were only growing, and he could sense that something much larger was about to unfold. The dignitary's arrival was still scheduled, but it seemed less and less likely that the event would proceed without incident. The guards were now bracing themselves for what could be a full-scale confrontation. And Liam knew that the next few moments would be crucial. Suddenly, an urgent call came from the palace's security office. There was a confirmed threat against the dignitary, and the situation had escalated further. The royal guard's mission had shifted from crowd control to full-on protection of the royal family and their guests. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. This was no longer a simple ceremonial duty. It was a test of everything he had learned in his training. The dignitary was still on his way, but the arrival would have to be postponed. The guards were now instructed to form a protective circle around the royal family, and Liam found himself on the front lines, ready to face whatever came next. It wasn't just about standing still anymore. The royal guard was there to keep everyone safe, no matter the cost. As Liam stood in position, watching the crowd still simmering with tension, he couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. He had learned something vital that day that being a royal guard. It was about more than just following orders or looking impressive in a uniform. It was about being ready for anything, even the unexpected. It was about protecting the people, not just with strength, but with compassion. And as the event unfolded, Liam realized that his journey as a royal guard had only just begun. The surprises were far from over, and he was ready for whatever challenges would come next. Liam had always been fascinated by the royal guard. Growing up in a small town, he had seen them only from a distance, standing still like statues in front of the royal palace. Their red uniforms, gold-plated armor, and perfectly polished boots made them look like something out of a history book, not real people. To Liam, they seemed untouchable, like symbols of an ancient, powerful tradition. But he never imagined that one day he would be one of them. It wasn't easy to join the royal guard. It was the kind of position that only the most disciplined, strong and focused individuals could dream of holding. To become part of this prestigious group, one had to endure a series of rigorous tests, both physical and mental. The training was intense, and the standards were high. Liam, who had always been an ordinary young man with a simple life, knew that if he wanted to succeed, he would need to push himself beyond what he thought he was capable of. When he first arrived at the Royal Guard's training camp, it felt like entering a different world. The recruits were all in perfect shape, their bodies strong and their minds sharp. The first thing Liam noticed was how strict everything was. There was no room for mistakes, no time for hesitation. Each recruit was expected to perform flawlessly, whether it was standing in formation, marching in sync, or even something as simple as cleaning their uniforms. Every detail mattered, and the pressure was enormous. Liam, however, wasn't used to such a rigid way of life. Back home, life had been more relaxed. He would spend his days helping his family with the farm, enjoying simple pleasures, and living at a slower pace. Here, everything was about precision and perfection. At first, he struggled with the routine. His legs would ache after hours of marching. His back would hurt from standing perfectly still for long periods. He wasn't used to the strict commands or the sharp tones of the officers in charge. There were times when he wanted to give up, when the thought of returning to his old life seemed more appealing than the grueling training. But something inside him refused to quit. Liam wasn't sure what it was, perhaps a deep sense of duty or a burning desire to prove to himself that he could do it. But he kept pushing through the pain and frustration. Slowly, he began to adapt to the life of a Royal Guard recruit. His movements became more precise, his mind sharper. He learned to stand still for hours without shifting his weight or losing focus. He could march for miles without feeling the burning in his legs. The physical pain became a distant memory, replaced by a deep sense of accomplishment every time he mastered a new skill. The other recruits, many of whom came from different parts of the country, were going through the same struggles. Some of them came from military backgrounds, and others were fresh faces just like Liam. They were all in the same boat, enduring the same challenges. In the beginning, Liam had felt isolated and outsider among these highly disciplined individuals. But as time passed, he began to form bonds with some of the other recruits. They would share their stories during breaks, laugh about the mistakes they had made, and support each other when things got tough. One recruit in particular stood out to Liam. His name was Marcus, a tall, broad-shouldered young man with a quiet intensity. Marcus was the perfect soldier, strong, disciplined, and always ahead of the pack. But despite his strength, he had a kind side that Liam hadn't expected. One day, when Liam was struggling to keep up during a particularly difficult drill, Marcus noticed and slowed down to match his pace. "You're doing great," Marcus said, his deep voice offering a rare moment of encouragement. "We all have our days when we can't keep up, but that's when you push through. Keep going, you'll get there." Those words stuck with Liam. They gave him the extra strength he needed to keep going when things felt impossible. It was moments like these that reminded him that while the Royal Guard may seem like a place of strict rules and cold discipline, it was also a place where people supported one another, where bonds were formed in the most unexpected ways. As the weeks passed, Liam became more and more immersed in the world of the Royal Guard. The uniform was no longer just a piece of clothing to him. It symbolized something much deeper. It was a mark of honor, a commitment to something greater than himself. He learned the importance of his role in protecting not just the royal family, but the traditions and history that had been passed down for generations. The more Liam learned about the Royal Guard's history, the more he realized that this was not just about standing still or marching in formation. It was about protecting something that had lasted for centuries, a symbol of the nation's strength, unity, and pride. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of training, the recruits gathered in the mess hall to share a meal. The air was filled with the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread, a welcome break from the intense physical demands of the day. The conversation around the table turned to stories of past royal guards and their legendary feats. Liam listened intently as the older recruits shared stories of how the Royal Guard had once stopped an assassination attempt on the royal family, how they had once faced down a foreign invasion, and how their dedication to duty had earned them the respect of kings and queens alike. Liam was fascinated by these stories. The Royal Guard was not just a group of men in uniforms. They were guardians of the monarchy, protectors of the royal bloodline, and living symbols of courage and duty. The more Liam heard, the more he felt honored to be a part of this long and proud tradition. He realized that, although he was just one small part of a much larger whole, he was contributing to something that had far-reaching consequences. The training, however, was far from over. Every day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new tests. The recruits learned how to handle weapons, how to respond to threats, how to perform their duties with the utmost professionalism. They were taught how to remain calm under pressure, how to think quickly in moments of danger, and how to keep their composure no matter what. These skills would be tested in the days to come, when Liam would have to face challenges that he never expected. But for now, as Liam sat in the mess hall with his fellow recruits, he felt a sense of pride swelling within him. He had come so far since the day he first walked through the gates of the Royal Guard training camp. He wasn't the same young man who had stepped in with doubts and insecurities. He was a part of something much bigger now, and he was ready for whatever came next. Little did he know, his journey was about to take an unexpected turn. The life of a Royal Guard was full of surprises, and Liam was about to discover just how surprising it could be. But for the moment, he could sit back, take a deep breath, and enjoy the feeling of being one step closer to achieving his dream.